I'm Samantha Brentmoor, and welcome to the Rosemoor Roundtable, a limited discussion series hosted by Rose Dioro and myself, covering a range of topics specific to the romance audiobook industry. This first roundtable discussion centers on how the industry has evolved over the years. Today, we welcome two authors and two narrators who are well-known and respected in the space, each having incredible passion for both the genre and the audiobook format. The Rosemoor Roundtable is recorded over a live stream and produced and distributed by Brickshop Audio in podcast format. Without further ado, here's some cool stock music and your moderator for today, Rose.
Let's get started. Hi, everybody. So glad you're here, and thank you so much to our panelists for being here today. I'm going to just get us started by turning it over to our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us about when they got started in the industry, how they got started, what roles they serve in the romance audiobook industry, and just let these wonderful people tell you all about themselves.
Well, hi, I'm Andi Arndt, and I'm streaming in from West Michigan, where we moved about a year ago. I am an audiobook narrator of a little over 600 and some titles at this point. Got started in about 2010. And then as my career grew, I also took on production. I'm the founder, but no longer the owner, of Lyric Audiobooks and its program Audio in Color, which Nana and I co-founded. And along the way, I also started coaching. And Vikas and I are both faculty at narrator.life, where people can learn about the performance and business aspects of being an audiobook narrator. So that's me in a nutshell. I co-authored one little rom-com called Heidi's Guide to Four-Letter Words, which Lauren helped us name.
It was so good. I loved it.
Thank you, Andi.
And my turn, yay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vikas Adam. I've been narrating since 2012. I should do a count, but I think I'm approaching 500 audiobooks now. And I'm very lucky. I get to play in the romance genre as well as numerous other genres and genre hop a lot. What are some of the other questions? I'm streaming in from Santa Monica, lovely, beautiful Santa Monica for once. I can see the palm trees and the mountains. It's been raining a bunch, and today it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'm very happy about that. I am faculty at UCLA in the Department of Theater when I'm not recording audiobooks, and then of course narrator.life, which has been a huge treat. Because Andi's one of my very dear friends, and it's always a joy. Is that it? Did I get it all?
Yeah, I think you got it.
All the questions? Yeah.
And Lauren, would you like to go?
Yes. For those who are watching live, I apologize that I've been bouncing around. I'm Lauren Blakely. I write romance novels, and I also have 5 dogs. And my husband just got home, so they're all barking and greeting him as much as I'm trying to calm them down. So yeah, I have written over 100 romance novels. They are all in audio. Love working with narrators. I write often with voices in mind, really try to cast my books far in advance so that the voices truly do match the characters. And yeah, I'm just excited to chat about this.
Wonderful.
And I guess that leaves me.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nana Malone, Nana from Ghana. We'll make it easy to remember. And I am actually from Ghana. I know the accent is confusing, but whatever. I write sexy feel-good romance, and I've been published since 2010 with over 100. I've kind of lost count. I'm sure, Lauren, you know. You just are like, it's over 100. I don't know. And I am also the creator of the book club, the Brown Apple Challenge, and co-founder of Audio in Color. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. This is such an all-star panel to launch our very first episode of this endeavor. And we are just so grateful to you all for being here and for sharing your your expertise with us all today. And you've all been around for such a long time and can really speak to how the industry has changed over time. So I'm excited to dive in with you all right now. So why don't we just get into it? When we talk about the romance community, it really encapsulates a lot of spaces where fans and creators gather, and that's online and in person with conventions. And that's what it looks like today. Social media certainly plays a big part in how we connect with readers and listeners these days, but that wasn't always the case. I'm curious to hear, when you all got started, where was the community at that point? How were people gathering and finding each other? How are they finding your work? And this is both for authors and narrators today. Anyone who feels like they want to dive in and answer that question, if you can speak to how it has changed over time.
From the author perspective, I mean, it's huge changes. I mean, I'm sure, Lauren, you probably remember Yahoo Groups, which was how a lot of us were able to communicate with each other. That was a big thing. And then, I mean, people were using Facebook a little, but there wasn't the same kind of parasocial relationship. I mean, for those of us who were published in the Paleolithic era of romance, you saw things like Instagram become a thing and everybody kind of scrambling like, oh, wait, are we dropping Facebook? I remember things like Friendster and all those things that kind of fell by the wayside. But on the career public end, it was very interesting seeing social media really build up and that being the place where all of a sudden people could access authors, which is great from the reader perspective. But, as someone who's read my whole life, the idea of just like DMing Nora Roberts, like, can you imagine? I mean, just reaching out and being like, I love this book, or worse, I hated that book. And you're like, this is so close. But on the other hand, it really does bring this closeness with readers. There's nothing more amazing than having someone reach out and be like, oh my God, like your words or what you're writing or what you're doing has changed my life so much. And even like the advent of signings where people can like come to see you a lot of times. And it's like a lot of us are introverts and kind of awkward. And so it's like this weird thing having someone across from you crying sometimes. So it's this weird parasocial relationship. But it's definitely interesting. And as an author, since so much of our world is solitary narrators too, and you're in your office writing words with made up people, it becomes this great, like, oh, well, I'm doing it for these people who want to read the words and want not just these stories in my head, but they're out there and they're loving it and they want to be part of that world. So, it's changed a lot. And those who are able to stay, there are people who were published with me way back when who are no longer around. I'm like, whatever happened to so-and-so? And so I think that, you learn and you adapt and the ones who stick around are able to shift and move with the times and, throw away what you can't do or don't want to do. So, it's been fascinating watching the whole industry kind of grow and evolve.
Do you feel like your work has changed at all because of that relationship, that new type of relationship building?
Not for me, because I'm stubborn and I want to write what I want to write. So in terms of what I write, hopefully I'm better. Dear God, I don't want to look at those first early books, but what I write hasn't changed because I've kept my mission statement front of mind my whole career, which at the time, I loved, back then, I loved like chick lit and that rom-com, but I wanted to write highly marketable books that belonged at the front of store, because as a reader, I didn't know that you paid for those slots, belonged at the front of store placement, highly marketable, highly enjoyable, really fun, but featuring a lot of women of color because that was missing back then. And that's just what I've kept in mind as I write. I write everyone, people who look like my family and my friends, which are very multicultural, but that's been front of mind. So I haven't changed that my whole career, and that's not going to change. So for me, it hasn't changed anything, but I can't speak for anyone else.
I'm curious to hear from Andi or Vikas about, from a narrator's perspective, if were you present, were you on the scene to see this shift happen? And if so, what did you start to notice as social media became such an access point? And certainly, I think also from a narrator perspective specifically, rather than an author perspective, where we're kind of behind the scenes, right? So did you feel at all this shift to easier access to narrators, between narrators and listeners, has changed what it means to be a narrator? Has it changed the way that you do your work? And what was that shift like when it started to happen?
To me, there was a before and after oral fixation, the group, which is at now like 13,000
Oh my God. Yeah, it's so big.
members. And, I was at a wedding of 2 narrators last fall, and I realized, wait a second, I think I'm in the suburb of LA where Lydia Rella lives. And so I got in touch with her, and we ended up, getting together to have a drink. And so to me, that group and everything that it has, the offshoots and the events that they support and everything, I really feel like there's a before that group and an after that group. So for me, that was the watershed moment. That was, a 2015, 16?
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't even recall. I did, I think, like a romance or two before 2015, and then oral fixation invited me in, and I was like, whoa, this whole new world is here. And it was beautiful to be able to meet people through there. And I think that ended up actually also opening up the possibility for me to be seen as doing. Up until then, I was really doing a lot of YA. I was doing a lot of literary fiction and stuff that really had a lot of a South Asian perspective to it, because that's how I started. And so it was really, for me, it was fun to be able to play with romance. Especially, I'm a Cancer. I'm emotional. So I'm such a water sign. I'm a big sop, and so I've always loved the genre. So to be able to actually play it, and I was never gonna be, from on a camera acting or even stage acting standpoint, I was never seen as the type to be able to do that, which is fine. But for voiceover, it was fascinating to be able to play that.
That's so interesting.
Can I throw something over to Lauren? Lauren, please. I think you found me through oral fixation interaction, didn't you? Isn't that how we got?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, things have definitely, the way that we connect with, as authors, the way that we connect with narrators, the way that we connect with fans has definitely changed. I mean, I would say, like, in the early days when I was starting to produce audiobooks, which was 2014 and 2015, you really just kind of mostly found people through ACX. If you were producing the books on your own, you would actually go listen to auditions. I remember being, at the time, being particularly interested in Zachary Weber and reaching out to him on ACX, which is sort of absurd because I don't really email people through ACX anymore. And obviously, I use ACX and I upload my books that way. But it was sort of harder to find people and to know who knew who and could connect you with who. And I think that is one of the things that has changed with, like, this beautiful explosion and enthusiasm that we've seen. I feel in a way, back in the day, that there's sort of those of us who are like in the club of listening to audio. I've kind of been an audio consumer for a long time. Having listened to like one of my first audiobooks, my gateway drug was Jesse Eisenberg narrated a YA series for Holly Black. I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so good. This is like what this medium can do. And it kind of got me hooked into it. And I just love watching, these layers keep coming on year after year. Like, and here's this new narrator, and here's these new group of fans. And, and every year, like, there's more that are coming into the fold. And it's definitely, like, the accessibility has increased. The discoverability has increased. And I think too, we all just need to kind of be on our toes because everyone is watching and paying attention.
that actually brings me to something I'm wondering about. We're hearing a lot about the positive side of this shift with social media and ACX and how it's impacted our ability to be able to connect with one another, both inside the industry and also with the consumers of what we're all making. But obviously there are drawbacks to social media, as we all know, and drawbacks to having that kind of access. I'd be curious to hear from you all how, if you'd like to share what are some of the negative sides of this? Does it ever feel overwhelming that folks can just reach you at any point in time? Does it feel overwhelming that you have to have a social media presence? Are there times where you kind of long for the days before this was sort of how our industry works? Anybody feel like jumping on that one?
Well, I want to hear what Nana has to say about this, but I hear from people a lot about who I should cast in the book I'm writing, that they don't even know who the character is. And it's like a little heartbreaking because so somebody will say, for instance, well, I really hope it's going to be Sebastian. And I say, trust me, you have loved Vic, you have loved Teddy Hamilton, you have loved Jason Clark. You're going to be okay. Like, and I do often say that to people, like, yes, I know you love him, but he's not my only narrator. But there definitely is, and I love it, and I encourage it, and I'm happy to hear it. But ultimately, I'm trying to cast the right people for the story that I'm hearing, and I try to do that more with my team and my gut and my insight, and I hope that ultimately the experience that the listeners have is the one that, like, delights their soul, right? That delights their romantic heart and their soul, whether the heroine is narrated by Andi or Rose, or whether the hero is Sebastian or Vic. It's like my job is to deliver that story to those people who will then bring it to life. But it is definitely something that I think we have to navigate as authors. And I do welcome it, but ultimately I have to have the own faith in my decisions, as the casting director. And that's challenging.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly as Lauren says, like, people have very strong opinions. And I always kind of laugh that when it comes to either the craft, because I'm not the kind of writer who can have like lots, like I don't really use beta readers or a lot of alpha reader. Like I'm not that person. I can't have voices in my head when I'm writing. When the story's ready, I have my editors that I trust with my life. And then I'm like, whatever you say, tell me what's wrong. But as I'm going, so it's always funny when, like, especially, I mean, like longtime listeners and people who really like, they depend on audiobooks, whether they commute or they're having accessibility issues or whatever the case is, and they will have strong opinions. And I'm like, you just need to trust me to make the choices that I'm going to make, because at the end of the day, it's still my creative, like whatever. So like at the end of the day, I'm going to make the choice. And then also like, I have other things to consider that, like, it's like, okay, if the characters are of color, like who am I casting? And like the choices I make in casting have a whole different other layer that I have to consider as I'm going. And then I'm also like, most of my books are set in London. I'm like, oh, what do those accents sound like? And then like, is there someone who's of Jamaican descent? And I'm like, can they do Jamaican? I mean, and sometimes you get pleasantly surprised. And sometimes you're like, oh, no. Oh no. And so you have to like think of all those things, but you've got these voices in your ear who are adamant that it has to sound like this. Or worse, when you put something out that you're really proud of and you're really excited about, and then someone chooses to send you an email or they send you a DM, or sometimes they send you both on multiple platforms. That accessibility is, whew, it's like, oh, you're so close right here. That's so close. So there is that thing. And then there's sometimes people like hate a casting or like, well, why did you pick this person? Or they don't sound like this, or, or stupid things like that heroine doesn't sound black enough. And I'm like, that's so weird, because that's Ebony Flowers. I don't know what you're thing. Or like, I mean, like all the things that come with that. But like by and large, most of it is so positive. Like, and you know, as all of us know, it's like once the work is out, you are already working on the next thing.
Right.
You're not really thinking about negative, like if you have a healthy relationship with your therapist, you're not really thinking about all the negativity that's like flowing back there, because it just hinders your ability to create and perform and do all those things. So while it is there, I personally, I will say helpfully to the audience, you know, later I'm going to go cry about it, but like you can't listen to that, because then you can't create and you can't move forward. I mean, and if there's something actually really wrong, you're like, haha, we'll fix that next time. But most of the time you can't let the negativity impact what you're doing. And by and large, it's mostly positive anyway. So that isn't really a thing. Because I mean, the ability to market our books and our audiobooks now is increased tenfold. I remember back in 2012 when I did my first audio, I was like, how do I tell people? Who do I tell?
Yeah.
Do I just leave it there? I don't know what to do. And now it's so much better, because at least I can make a plan and action things to do to support what I've paid a lot of money for.
I want to come back to that thought about how social media has changed, or sort of the new wave of how we connect with each other has changed marketing, and in terms of the narrators finding opportunities. But real quick, before we get into that, I'd love to hear from Andi and Vic about your perspectives, if you'd like to share, on the negative side of this easy availability, easy access to this very large community.
You know, for me, I've been very fortunate. I've had nothing but a lot of love from the fans, but there have been what it has opened up is an opportunity for teaching, because I have been very, very blessed to be able to do a couple pieces with Indian male characters who are the leads. And that means also having a name that has been mispronounced for a very long time on this side of the sea. And so when I insist on pronouncing it correctly, and my co-narrators, they're all on board, and we do it. And then afterwards, from some of the listeners, there will be a pushback of why he pronounced that name incorrectly. What is that? And an example is a very popular one was for the Charmed Offensive, the main character of Dave, which is DEV. And I know commonly it's Dev, but for Indians, we pronounce it Dave. And there was a huge outcry about that. And so it gave me an opportunity on a platform to be able to speak to that. And suddenly everyone was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. That's great. So that's been my experience with it.
Could I ask a question? How did you communicate that, Vic? When fans were pushing back and saying, wait, that's not how it's pronounced. How did you get the word out?
There was one on a review site where a listener commented in there in the comments, and I went ahead and was able to use their chat feature to go ahead and give them my perspective. And then I kind of had a little bit of a long thread on Twitter that may have been slightly snarky because I was just in a mood. But I'm actually now considering trying to see if I could use TikTok to do some of that and speak to some of the comments that I have seen and use it as a tool for educating versus, clapping back, because clapping back doesn't do anything. But
I love that idea. I do.
So now the fans are going to have to hold me to that.
Yeah. I think I, as well as Vic, have had overwhelmingly positive experience. I have heard things about some of my male colleagues who are getting lots of inappropriate, DM type things that they have to really set hard boundaries about. I have not really had that kind of thing. Again, it's been overwhelmingly positive. It's like crowd surfing. It's just like, just a trust fall into a giant pile of love most of the time. I go in and out of enthusiasm for the amount of posting that I do. And right now I'm in a mode where most of my social media is some version of, hi, here's a book. Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of taking the personal piece out of it from time to time, it sounds like. Maybe just using it solely for a marketing perspective. Because that's obviously a balance that we all have to find when we are working in an industry that is very public. A lot of people get to sail through life with social media being a choice for them, just a personal choice. I get to connect with my friends and I get to show you a picture of what I'm eating today or whatever it is. And then for those of us who work in this public forum, it often can't just be that, right? Or we feel the need, I guess, to make it not just that and to utilize the power, the marketing power that it can provide. But then it sounds like you, Andi, make choices about maybe I just want it to be marketing for now. Or maybe I don't feel like marketing and I just want to, I don't know if you ever make this choice, but one could then make the choice to say, I'm just going to use it kind of personally for a little while. But I know I've had that experience. My connection to social media, I tend to not really enjoy using it in a personal way and like to use it more through the lens of my work. I think I would probably say goodbye to it altogether if I didn't do what I do. But that sounds very healthy to say, I'm going to kind of just share, this is the book I'm working on right now. See you later from time to time when it gets to be too much.
I am working on a major reboot of my website. It's going to be completely different. I'm super excited about it. April 10th. I'm telling you, it's going to be a beautiful.
I'm actually getting a website.
Bro.
Welcome to the modern world.
Yeah. Oh, boy. All right.
But yeah, I'm going to use it as really a creative hub. And so rather than it being sort of scattered all over all these different platforms, it'll start with my website and broadcast out as needed. Yeah.
Why do some narrators not have websites?
Why?
No.
For me, I'll be very honest. For me, I'm so fortunate. I'm so lucky. I'm not the typical story. I'm so lucky where I just continued. The work kept coming, and I was busy and I was working, and I'm very blessed. In that way where I didn't have to for the longest time. Now it is about wanting to have that footprint out there and a chance to be able to, but it's also fear, I think, for me. There's a lot of techno fear that comes with it. And dare I even say a little bit of imposter syndrome where I'm like, well, what do I have to say? And but I understand the importance of it, and which is why I'm like, I'm working with a wonderful person who's getting it done. I got some new business cards that I'm super excited about. Things are happening.
But Lauren, that's a good question to kind of dive into a little bit more. I really wanted to spend a little time talking about the navigating of, especially for the narrators, of finding work sort of pre and post social media wave and ACX and all of that, and how that kind of shifted casting. And I think that the our authors here can speak to this too, but I'd love to start with our narrators to touch on that a little bit. What has that looked like for you over the years? We just heard from you, Vic, so maybe Andi, if you want to get us started on that part of the conversation.
Well, when I first was starting, I made this really cool chart. Oh, Lauren, you're going to be shocked to know that I made a spreadsheet. But I made a spreadsheet where I color coded my clients. And every time I got a new client, I would, mention the book and the author and everything in this record, but I would change the color. So I could see, I started working for Audible and that was orange. And so then whenever I got another Audible title, it'd be orange. And the most interesting thing was every time I went to an in-person thing, and at first it was within the audiobook industry, but it started to be book events. Every time I went to an in-person thing, about 3 months later, a new color would pop into that chart. And so I went from 1 color to 2 colors to 4 colors to 10 colors to, it's just like the more I showed up at in-person stuff, it just bloomed. And so that's been the major game changer for me is in-person events.
And so this was earlier in your career when you started to see that? Or is that even now you're saying still?
Well, as far as how I even got my first romance assigned, I went to an industry event that happens every July in Maine. And I met a producer who's since passed away named Bill DeFries, who was transformative in my career. And he's the one who assigned me Kylie Scott's Lick, but I met him over lobsters. And then it just started to kind of get this momentum where I would have people coming to me because they were familiar with another book I did. It's probably the way it happens for Vic too. Somebody hears you on a book, they're casting a related book. How do I get in touch with Vic? I find his social media or whatever. I reach out. Because Vic, you don't have an agent, right?
No, not for audiobooks,
I mean,
no.
we don't really use agent. There are some narrators who also have a very busy film, TV, stage career. And so it makes sense for them to have an agent to kind of make sure they don't get overscheduled in combination of all those things and negotiating rates and all that kind of stuff. But most of us, we just are in charge of scaring up our own work.
Yeah, audio is definitely, as a narrator, is about personal connections and building those personal connections. And that's what's so interesting to me to think about how those connections are made as time has changed. And you talked about meeting in person. And I think that still is true, even with social media, that when you get an opportunity to be in a room full of producers and other narrators and authors, you hopefully are getting more colors on your chart each time. But especially with COVID and so many new narrators starting this as a gig during this time where they couldn't be in person, it seems to me like that has changed quite a bit. So maybe those personal connections are more frequently being made sort of in the interwebs now. And Andi and Vic, you both work with folks who are still learning and are kind of new. Have you heard from any of your students? Do they report to you sort of what that has looked like for them in this COVID world, if they've just gotten started or even just starting later than you have in this industry? Has their journey looked different than yours? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, look at Discord and TikTok. Like Travis Baldry. I just saw Travis's Legends and Lattes, which is now a Macmillan release, in the window of a bookstore in Richmond, Virginia. And I was telling my husband, like, Travis started as a peach, narrating bad audition material from ACX as a Snapchat peach with the Snapchat peach filter on. And then he progressed to like 1 NaNoWriMo. He was like, I'm going to write a book. And now it's, it's just, so to me, Discord and TikTok were big pandemic emergences.
Well, it's also, I think it's remembering everybody has their own journey and there is not just one right way to do it. I mean, when it comes to the personal relationships, something I learned from a professor of mine was don't meet people with that energy of, oh, are you going to give me a job? Okay, what can you do for me? What can you give me? Can you? And I think that's really important, especially at like when we have our big events where we're meeting producers, and you've got the opportunity to meet people at conventions and stuff. My personal mantra is always to how can I have a personal relationship? How can I get to know this person? How can we find common ground and talk about things that we like? And if something's going to happen, something's going to happen. But my personal thing is I can't do that. Otherwise, I think it reads.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's an equivalent in author world of like, how are authors getting through the, there's so many more releases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, it used to be, I've heard that, 10 years ago, if you got on the radar of a few influential bloggers, you were golden. And it's so not like that anymore.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember those days, Nana? When there were a couple bloggers and they loved your book?
I remember the time I could just have my book. It was done. I could throw it up and I would be like sub 1K in the Kindle store. And I was like, nice. And then like make a bunch of money and be like, that was great. And then like 4 months later, do it again. It was nothing. I didn't even think about it. And then suddenly it was KU. And I was like, well, that's harder. And then it was KU2. And then it was like, oh. And then it was like, there were bloggers. And suddenly like this whole industry built around like this like secondary industry built around authors. And I was like, wait, bloggers? What? And if you didn't learn to adjust quickly and well, you were going to struggle and you were going to have a hard time with discoverability. And then there was also like an access problem. And I think that like, if you didn't have like a close network of friends to learn together, and I think this has been the difficulty for a lot of authors of color, like especially starting out, like if you didn't have a network, like I didn't know how to find narrators outside of ACX for ages. And I didn't have like other friends who knew. They're just like, oh, just go to ACX. And I was like, but that's like going through stock photos. And, and like, I was like, to get access to someone like, Zachary Webb, where you could try and reach him through ACX, he wasn't going to respond, and the more Lauren knows, and so he's hard to get a hold of. And so like even access to like the production companies, I remember asking of like a very big author at the time, this must have been like 2014, 2015, maybe. And I was like, oh, we were just talking at an event and I was like, oh, and she'd worked with like one of like the bigger production companies. I was like, oh, how did you get like, like, do you have a contact? And like, cause we'd just been talking shop and she just was like very cagey and she didn't want to share. And I was like, that's so weird. And like, but like there was no access in. And I think that's kind of what Andi and I were trying to change by, doing things like audio and color and giving like those authors who haven't had access. Cause if you don't have access and you don't have access to like the best narrators in the world, like Vikas and Andi, and like you don't have access and you don't know how to get access, it's really, really difficult. Because if someone had handed me money in 2010, 2012 and been like, here's money, produce this audiobook, and you have access to whoever you want to narrate. And you could have been like, I want this person and this person and this person. Excellent. But that's an access thing that a lot of authors don't have or can't get to or don't know how to access. So like this advent now that we can just DM somebody and be like, well, fingers crossed. I'm just going to out to Shane East. Who knows? Maybe the ability to like, and not through ACX or something, because that's just the pop. But like the fact that they have websites, Vikas, please, I beg you. It's long past.
It's happening. I promise. He's in Turks. He's in Turks right now, but he's going to be doing it as soon as he comes back.
But like, because like, especially like I have South Asian author friends who like really want like they're like, how do I even access? And I'm like, so then you're like, well, ACX or find a way, and you just hope and pray. I mean, like so this whole access thing is like a real thing. So now being able to get that and being able, like, I mean, I know people who are just like, yeah, I went to TikTok and found this guy with a great voice. And I was like, but is he an actor though? I just, because it's different than when someone's just like reading it, because we've all heard that.
Audio file.
Or chopping wood.
Audio.
Right? Or chopping wood. Listen, don't you judge what I watch. Don't you judge what
But
it's research.
But Audiophile Magazine, if I recall, Audiophile Magazine has a listing of narrators as well. So that is another resource.
Yes. No, definitely. I mean, and there are ways. I mean, like Andi and I met at RT 20
in Vegas.
In Vegas, whichever Vegas one that was. But it was like, and I was like, I just couldn't even believe she wanted to talk to me. I was like, no, but I listened to your, why do you want to, you're talking to me? And like, I didn't know that I could just like reach out and talk to Andi Arndt. I didn't know that because to me, she was a superstar. So I was like, I don't have access to her, but I was like, she was very nice. And then a couple of years later, she was like, yeah, I'll do your book. And I was like, really? But then I had access to lyric audiobooks. I was like, oh, because someone had been like, I use lyric. Here's their email. Because someone had been like really kind and generous and was like, just go through lyric. It'll be a lot easier. Because I was sifting through being like, I'm trying to find a British guy and a Black woman. And it's just proving impossible. I mean, and they were like, oh, just use lyric. They'll do the work for you. And I was like, open up. It was just like this watershed of being able to access who I wanted to, when I wanted to, with ease, which can be difficult if you don't have the access. And then like Andi did a book and we became friends. And next thing I know, she's like yelling at me. She was like, we need to do audio and color. And I was like, okay. I say it like she browbeat me into it, which she did. But I mean, like, we just met randomly at a conference and she was lovely. And I was like, she's so nice. She's famous and she was nice to me. And we became friends. So like, those events really do work in terms of connections and being able to access people and opening doors that you don't even know are opening to you until years later.
Nana, do you think it's important, we're in some author groups together that like authors just constantly be, I don't know, constantly is not the right word, but just that we should kind of be open about narrators, who might not fit in the typical box. And I think that we try to, with our other, with our author friends, to make sure that people know, okay, if you're looking for, like here's this amazing, Black female narrator, here's this terrific Asian male narrator, just like to kind of make sure, even if I might not be using that person for my books, I listened to this book. I thought this person was great. So I'll try as much as I'm able to get that word out so that the access, well, that doesn't really solve the problem of the access, but at least the knowledge is out there. And I think that's something you're so good at as well, is just making sure to kind of champion and put those names out there. Because I do think a lot of authors want to make sure, now we're talking about like casting appropriately, but they want to make sure they're casting appropriately, but they also just want to make sure that they know of everybody. So I don't know. I just think it's a good thing to keep talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think
know who's out there.
I mean, and I think that like in author circle, it's so strange, right? Because there are people who just like, there's certain names that like, if you have them on your book, if Andi's on a book, I know that book's going to sell. Right? Like I know that it's an automatic and it's like, well, Andi's on it. So I don't like the marketing work is less, right? And so like speaking as an author of color, like sometimes I have to make choices, right? Because like in now this part of my career, I'm like, yeah, Black female narrator. Like it doesn't even like, I don't have to do that. Like I don't have to make a choice. But like earlier on in my career, maybe I had to make a choice. Like I wanted to cast appropriately, but maybe I couldn't find the right person. I didn't have access to the right person. So maybe I go, but that's a choice that, authors of color have to make if you're trying to, sometimes you have to make the choice about like, do I need easy marketing so that this thing sells and I can at least get this character in front of people? Or do I want to make like appropriate casting choice? And sometimes you do that. And whatever you want to do is good for you. Like that, you'll never get any judgment from me. But like, as authors, when we talk about narrators, I think it's kind of like I talk about in the Brown Nipple Challenge. It's more than just like talking about how great they are and being like, oh my God, I just met Vikas Adam and he's hilarious and funny and you need to cast him immediately and blah, 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 blah. Like it's more than that. It's also like me inviting Vikas onto my platform to have a conversation about audiobooks or to do a book with him and then like have him on my platform. Because like Andi and I are going to talk about when we talk about audio and color, it's that connection that the audience makes to the person because they already have a connection to you. It's more than us just being like, hey, this person's great. Because I find that that connects less with the audience. Like I can recommend books by authors of color all day long. And sometimes people will listen. Sometimes people will be like, oh my God, you were so right. That was so great. But it's a different thing when I pull them onto my platform, big or small, however it may be. And people can also connect to that person and be like, she was right. They're amazing. That's a whole different thing, right? And so like us being able to use our platforms like that to be like, no, I just had this great conversation with this narrator and we were talking about this and this and that. Or even if we loved a book or loved a narration and we're like, do you want to come talk to me about it? That's a great way to do that because it's not even about us. And that makes it, because I mean, Lauren, I know you listen to audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks too. And half the time I'm just like, that was so amazing because I can't, my eyes are old and these glasses don't work as well as they should. And so like, I can't read all the time. So like when I'm like on a break from a book, like I just inhale audiobooks and I'm like, oh my God, that was so good. And like, or I love the quality about a voice and to be able to pull that person onto your platform and be like, hey, you want to talk for 30 minutes live so people can also hear your voice for themselves. That's work that is easy to do. And that's something that the readers are going to respond to and be like, oh my God, I heard that voice too. And then they start going to look for these people to be like, I need more by so-and-so. And then that's more than a, hey, go check out this thing that Vikas did because he was great. Because that, while you get one or two, it's different than you got like 200 people over a 30-minute span to like hear him from themselves. And then Vikas did the work and he didn't think it was work, but then all of a sudden he's got all these authors being like, hey, so I have this book. And that I have found through audio and color and the Roundtable Challenge has been the easiest way to get the word out and spread a little bit easier because people respond to that connection that they make as opposed to just like a straight rack, I think.
And what you're saying about bringing folks onto a platform, I think does speak to sort of how the industry has changed too, you know, that there is, those platforms are more accessible to more people. So if you can get your stuff, you can get your podcast, you can get your blog, you can get your Facebook Live out to so many more people. So it becomes an even more powerful platform. But I would love to for Andi, for you, for the two of you, Andi and Nana, to tell us what audio and color is. Tell us about the Roundtable Challenge for anyone who is unfamiliar, because obviously it plays so much into what you're talking about now. I want to make sure everybody is aware of what it is that you're referencing.
And do you want to do the handoff we did last time?
The handoff?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll start with Roundtable Challenge, then I'll hand off to audio and color.
Got it.
Because it's a funny story because I play it like Andi browbeat me, which she did. I was innocently sitting there minding my business. I
was persistent.
She was persistent. So the Roundtable Challenge started mid to late 2020 as we were in the middle of uprising here in America and around the world. And I wanted to do something that was sustainable and like I was just feeling exhausted and beaten down by just everything that was happening. And I was like, but I want to do something that I can manage and sustain in like my little corner of the world. Like, what can I do to enact change? Because you know, I've been in this industry for a long time and I have been very, very lucky and fortunate, like extremely lucky that I had people that were willing to help me along the way. But there were authors of color who were having the same problems that I did in the early days, access, not knowing, not being able to get any discoverability, not like being able to like, even like, it's very isolating. You don't know groups and like, you're like, I just kind of like showed up here. And so I wanted to at least, if I could even crack open a door, any door, to help other authors who had been like me, I wanted to be able to do that. And so, I mean, I just started something. I was like, it's like a book club. How hard can this be? I didn't really think it through in terms of being like a statement or a movement. I just was like, well, people are always sitting here being like, I don't know where to find books by authors of color. And I was like, so your Google is broken? That's weird. Mine works fine. I can go and type in, you know, interracial romance, African-American romance, and I get a whole list of authors. My name comes up at the top of like the top 5. Like you can, that's weird. Maybe your Google doesn't work. So I can at least bring you books by authors of color that I know and love that are like great, or even new discoveries of mine and being like, oh, I love this book by this person I didn't even know. And so it was just a book club idea and I was having fun. And Andi reached out, and all of the romance community really had been so supportive. They were like, oh my God, this is great. And I just was really overwhelmed. I didn't know what to say. And people were like, well, how do I help? And I was like, I don't know. And so Andi had reached out and was like, this is fantastic. I'm doing the book club. I'm like, great. Come listen. We're talking on whatever date. And then she came and she hung out, made comments. Thank you for that. And, the next month she was like, no, we want to support you with Lyric. How do we do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And then finally we were talking and she was like, I'm noticing the last book didn't have an audiobook associated with it. And I was like, I know, so frustrating, right? Because I tend to want to just pick the audiobook ones, but reading with my eyeballs, but it was really good and worth it. And she was like, but why doesn't it have an audio? She's so great. And I was like, truth? It's expensive. It's really expensive. You know that. And so that's cost prohibitive for a lot of authors, especially authors of color who are maybe having just like getting their footholds in the industry. And Andi was like, hold my champagne. I'll be right back. And then next thing I know, Andi's like, well, you know what? What if we could help get money for some authors? And I was like, what are you talking about? And then Andi wouldn't leave me alone. So then I'll hand off to Andi now.
Well, yeah. So I had been contacted by a fairly major entity wanting to know if I had any ideas how to work with them. And I really didn't understand what they were talking about. But then after Nana and I talked about this funding thing, I was like, wait a second. I have this meeting with this entity and I'll just ask. So I was like, hey, how about $30,000 for some
casually
for some audiobooks? And I mean that's greatly condensed, but they agreed that it was a really good thing and an important thing to do. And so we created the Audio and Color grant program with Nana coming from the Brown Nipple Challenge side, and with me and Katie Robinson at Lyric. And Katie now owns Lyric. Yay. And so when we announced it, there was this groundswell of like, oh, obviously you need contributions. So where do we contribute? And we were like, well,
and people were aggressive about trying to contribute
where's the GoFundMe? And we're like, I guess we better have a GoFundMe.
Yelled at me. She was like, I will send you cash in the mail. And I was like, this is what? And so like I contacted, I was like, I think we need a basket.
Yeah. So we created a GoFundMe, and Lauren actually was one of our first major donors on that, and Marie Force. And so many listeners and so many bloggers, and people gave what they could. And so all of a sudden that meant that we could do even 2 more books than we had funding for. And the happy ending to the first round of Audio and Color is that one of our grant-funded titles, Crushing on You by Jen Trin, is an Audie finalist in romance this year. And that is exactly the heck why we wanted to do this, is to give authors of excellent books access to excellent audiobooks. And so now we're going into round 2 fundraising. The GoFundMe, a new GoFundMe is open for round 2. And we were encouraged by another major donor to go 501c3 so that those donations could be tax deductible. And that is underway right now, where the 501c3 paperwork has been submitted. We're just waiting to hear back when it is official. So
amazing.
The end.
Amazing. Amazing.
I want to be like Andi and Nana when I finally grow up and get a website.
I think we all do. Lauren, I would love to ask you, you've done a lot to shift trends in the audio part of the romance world. And since we're talking about Audio and Color, giving a platform to not just writers of color, but also narrators of color, I know that you have on your web, you've made statements about casting appropriately for characters in terms of race. And I would love to hear from you if you'd like to share. To me, that feels like a big leap forward in the industry, a big shift in the industry, something that people are kind of slow on the uptake, but it's starting to change. Paying attention to that type of authenticity in casting. Can you speak a little bit about what made you have an interest in talking about that, have an interest in casting that way? Was there a certain point in the course of your relationship to audio where there was a shift in that direction, or was that always sort of how you were working?
No, I made a very big mistake, a very public mistake, when I cast a white actor for a biracial character who was half Black. And, fans pointed it out, and I realized, oh my God, I really messed up. And I kind of had to take responsibility for that decision and to learn from it, and to educate myself and sort of own the choice that not to own the choice that I made, to own the mistake that I had made, and to be very transparent and clear about it, that it should not have happened, it should not have occurred, and that I would be changing my casting policies going forward. Now, to be fair, I don't write a lot of main characters of color anymore, because I just don't think I am the best author to do that. I have spoken with author friends like Nana and Kennedy Ryan and many others, just to really talk about, like, is that even something that I should be doing? Probably not, because it's better, I think, for me to support and uplift and use my platform to support usually women of color who are writing those characters. Anyway, but that was a turning point for me in realizing, okay, this is really important to the industry, to the country, and to people that I do this. So yeah, I had to I had to take responsibility for that mistake, and it also led me to really think about how women are paid in the industry, whether I also have a diverse narrator stable, if you will. Like, even if I am not writing an Indian man, for instance, like, Vic can play a white dude, and he has for me. So it's a matter of just and making sure that I am working with narrators of different backgrounds, narrators of different diverse backgrounds, of different colors, to play the primarily white lead characters that I have as a white person. So that experience helped me just to kind of expand and think deeper and look farther and really learn more about who the narrators are, in as much as I am able to find that information that is publicly available, about somebody's, I hope I'm using the correct terms, like racial background. But it also led me to think in general about, like I said, the industry and women. And I have a lot of close relationships with women in the industry who are narrators. Andi and I go way back. I'm also very close with Emma Wilder, and we have a lot of deep conversations about the business and how it works. And I'm, very close with other authors like C.D. Reese, who I think was really on the forefront of equity and pay. So in addition to kind of trying to correct and learn about racially appropriate casting, I made a decision to make sure that I was paying women and men of equal experience on my books the same amount. And if I hire somebody for the first time, like if it's the first time they're doing a book for me, like I won't always have equal picks. I think there has to be a little bit of like a learning experience of us working together, making sure it's a good relationship. And then if it is, and we're going to continue to work together on an ongoing basis, like I will set a rate, and I'm very transparent with the men and the women. Like this is what I pay. And everybody knows, Andi and Zach are on an upcoming title for me. They both know what each other will be making. Like when I have Vanessa Edwin and Teddy Hamilton, I'm like, you both are being paid this amount per equal pay policy. Because I think it's important too that the men who have primarily been paid more in the past know. Like, it's not just enough for me to say to Andi or to say to Rose when I hired you, hey, Rose, I'm going to pay you the same as Jason Clark. Like, I want Jason to know that as well. It doesn't feel a lot of good if I'm just whispering to Rose, like, hey, girl, I got you. I'll pay you the same amount I'm paying the guy. So I just think that transparency is important. And I've heard other authors who have started to tackle that. It's not something that everybody wants to take on. Different authors have, different ways of viewing things, and that's fine. Some see it more as an experience thing. This was just important to me, and I just want the women to not be working their butts off for $150 less than the guy is getting on the same book. I guess that's my soapbox.
Thank you for all you've done to help with that shift in the industry. And what you've said is so important and speaks again to what Nana was saying before about platforms, right? Like, just turning to this person sort of in private and saying, this is what I'm doing for you, is not nearly as impactful as bringing everyone involved into the fold so everyone understands exactly what's going on and why. So I want to sort of shift gears a little bit to talk about, this still relates to what we're talking about, but shifting a little bit about mile markers, key milestones in the romance audiobook landscape that led, do you know, can you identify, I mean, Lauren, you spoke to this a little bit, maybe Vikas, it would be great to hear from you. You kind of touched on it a little while ago about oral fixation. As a narrator, why is it so hard to say that word correctly? Oral fixation, and that sort of, perhaps that being a moment that you noticed as a shift, your sort of entry into the romance world. Are there other things that you noticed at that time, or other moments that you can pinpoint of things shifting, either as a narrator of color or as just romance in general, feeling like, I don't know, do you think that the industry has been consistent in many ways throughout your time in it? Or are there moments that you feel that it's really changed and sort of evolved?
I've noticed when I've had so many wonderful listeners who have been supportive, and they've reached out, and they've been nothing but kind and sweet. And that's when I started noticing the shift for me as to like, wow, wait a minute. And then I think I think it's like so recent, but it really, the convention in October in Chicago, where it was my first, oh my gosh, but it's escaping me. Allure, thank you. It was my first conference, and getting to meet some of the amazing fans and really seeing Andi in her element. I was like, whoa, I've like known you for years, but this was like the first time that I've seen you in this particular atmosphere. That was a changer for me. And the other thing also recently, I think I forgot who did it, but someone on TikTok did the book boyfriend little app thingy. It's like you put your thing. It's like your book boyfriend. Who's your book boyfriend?
I remember seeing you
and seeing my name as one of them just made me go, what? I was like, I never would have thought that. And so that was it was very, very heartening for me. And because there's always that stuff in the past. It's like it was the queer boy growing up, and now I'm being embraced to be able to like play these straight characters, and that's huge.
I don't know if you saw Laura Jones is apparently the person behind that book boyfriend thing.
Thank you, Laura.
Does anyone else want to speak to that question of who hasn't gotten a chance to say sort of the defining moment in a shift in the industry that they've noticed in any sort of way, how your relationship to it has changed, if there's a moment you can identify, if you haven't gotten something you haven't gotten to share yet?
I think the first year that an indie title won an Audio Award for romance, that was major.
Was that
because
Queen? Was that you and CD Reese for that
was
Marriage Games?
That was Erotica.
Okay.
I think the first indie that won, because that year Kylie Scott's Dirty was released by Macmillan, so that doesn't count. But I think it was 2018 or 2019. An indie romance won an Audie Award, and it just felt like, okay, this whole world that to me seemed so huge. And if you read romance, you were aware of indies, and you were aware of, Lauren Blakely and Nana Malone and, Jessica Hawkins and like all of these authors that I had been working with, who I saw how they just put their heart and soul into running their kingdoms. I mean, I worked with A.L. Jackson when she was indie, and then went with a publisher for a trilogy, and then took everything back indie because she was like, I want control over my marketing, my direct communication with my audience. And I remember Jeffrey Kafer one time responded to someone had made a remark, what happens with romance. And Jeff Kafer was like, these, by and large, women know their shit. These are formidable business women, so sit down. And I was like, thank you. So I was just really proud the year that the Audie Awards recognized an indie, and that felt like a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Nana and Lauren, is anything you want to add, other shifts that you maybe didn't get to touch on?
I think the only thing that I've been thinking about as we've spoken about casting is, I just want to say, I look for narrators everywhere. I find narrators, and I'm kind of answering a question that hasn't entirely been asked, but I find narrators everywhere. I have an audition form on my site for narrators. I found some narrators that way. I find them as a listener. I listened to a Colleen Hoover book, like almost everyone has, and it was narrated by Brittany Presley and Ryan West, and I love Brittany Presley. I thought, oh my God, Ryan West, where have you been my whole life? And I've since hired him. And I also think, social media is just another place that we find people. I requested an audition last weekend from a female narrator who I just really enjoy her on TikTok. She's got, I think, about 90,000 followers, and she did a terrific audition. I don't have a part for her yet, but she's somebody that I'm going to keep in mind. So I just sort of think it's going to sound kind of cheesy or silly, but it's like, you just never know where you're going to find voices. And that doesn't mean I'm trying to discover somebody new, but I just think, like, just kind of having your ears open and paying attention and being a consumer and being a listener, and if you're not, talking to your friends. And that's how you're going to know who you want to work with. So I think hopefully that's maybe useful to the authors and maybe useful to other narrators out there who may or may not be listening or watching this, is like, we just kind of find people, right, Nana, like in all sorts of different ways. Like you come across, it's almost like how you find out about different authors, right? A friend tells you about somebody else, the next time you get a recommendation on Amazon. It's the same with narrators. Just have to be open, be a sponge.
I mean, sometimes like people will DM me on Instagram and I'm like, who are you? And then you go down the rabbit hole and you're like, oh, I really like their voice. And then you sometimes will be like, Andy's like, yeah, no, they're already in our stable. Like, I know. But like, I mean, yeah, you hear someone that, like, sometimes I will get, like, I'll hear an audiobook and I'm like, who is that? And then I will like trying to hunt them down. And sometimes they don't have a website, which is terrible.
I'm just like, I mean,
Yeah.
damn
So then
straight.
you have to, like hustle and be like, you run around to all your narrator people, be like, do you know this person? And then you try and then you find out they're using a pen name, and then you have to, but like sometimes you're like, I need this voice, and you like hunt it down and you parse it out and you're like, it's them. And then you're like, oh, excellent. Now I can have access.
I truly believe I could be a private investigator, because if an author wants somebody to co-narrate with me bad enough, I will find them. I will absolutely, like, I found Sebastian York.
Listen,
in 2014 or 2015 or whatever. And Lauren, you know that he was not easy to find.
Oh.
And I even had a major producer in our industry tell me that I didn't want to find him. And I was like, oh, but I do though. So you're not going to help me. So
thank you. Thank you for finding him on behalf of everyone.
Because I got him because of you, Andi. I was working with Casey Odom at the time. And I was like, I really want Sebastian York on these books. And I have no idea how to find him. And she was like, I know someone who will know.
Yeah. And so in my phone, in case, I feel like I have this picture that is like, if it were a printed out actual like little 3.5 by 5 photograph, it would be in a little box on my wall that says, in case you need to break the internet, break glass. Because I have a picture of me and Sebastian from one of my last visits to New York that he was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's take this picture. And I was like, I'm going to hold on to this picture until I really need, until I'm going to like run for president. I'm going to be like, okay, now I really need everybody's attention.
You're going to keep that phone.
You'll garner attention from a very specific group of people.
So nobody touches that.
Could you understand the people that would stalk you and hunt you down for that phone?
I do.
But it's locked in like a safe at the bottom of the ocean.
She's got some crazy biometrics on that phone now.
It's like a flip. It's like, I don't know how to use one of those anymore.
These points about casting are a great segue to my last question. I'm going to kind of combine two questions here, just in the interest of time. Would anyone like to share sort of what your hopes and dreams are for the relationship between author and narrator over the next 5, 10, 20 years? Are there things that you would like to see shift, ways that you find your narrators if you're an author? Access that you have to the author that you're working with if you're a narrator, anything that you're not seeing yet that you would love to see in the future?
I'm going to preach to the choir here, but I'm just going to say it because it's such a hot topic right now since we're talking the future, but really appreciating and loving and continuing to support the human narrator and the human voice, especially in romance, but in all forms of audiobooks, because that it's concerning.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. I think I would say that I love romance, and yet at the same time, I'm not getting younger, and I would love to see more romance, sort of lifespan romance stories, like, so that as my brain is older, even though my voice continues to stay what it is, my daughters are both in college. And so I'm aware when I have a heroine who's very young, how close that heroine is in age to my daughters. And so I love that, what are we calling it? Seasoned romance, or like, or just like stories that have a romance in them that also have the characters have a life's worth of experience and baggage, but also the gift of experience in a way that makes things like even extra hot. And, I don't want to have to give up romance as I get older, and who knows what my voice is going to do. It may sound older at some point as well, but that's my hope and dream. And also to go to Spain and hang out with Fiona Zed with Nana.
Yes, we're going to make that happen. Yeah.
And see Lauren again and have some more sushi when it's not about to be COVID lockdown.
Just want to jump in really quick. You can actually go to vikasadam.com. You'll just get a page that says nothing's there yet or something like that.
But it's coming.
I love that.
It's on its way.
Yes, but
It doesn't have the coming soon yet, but it's
I love that
It's coming soon.
Nana, what about you? What would you, in terms of relationship author to narrator, what's a big hope and dream that you have for the future?
A big hope and dream for me would be that anyone who wants to produce audiobook will be able to have the means, like however that happens, whether it's in the ways that we have now or in ways that are better and support the narrators more so narrators can take a risk, but that the production will be more affordable to anyone who wants to produce it using narrators and using actors who are narrators. Because that's been the biggest, I think, roadblock to a lot of people doing audio. And, it's not that people don't want to do audio, they do, but it's like, there's an accessibility problem to like the sheer cost of it is cost prohibitive. So I'd really love to see that in the future in some way, make that attainable for the kind and for using the kind of narrators that they want, whether it's like, wherever you produce it, like the narrator gets like a cut and they get paid first or whatever the case is, so that it's something that the narrators are like, yes, but that authors aren't, having to like really make a choice about whether or not they're going to put something in audiobook. I would really love to see that.
Lauren, anything you'd like to add?
I love the collaboration when there's an opportunity for it. I love if a narrator has questions or wants to talk about characters or whatever it is. I think all of that can just make for a better experience for the listeners, which I think is what we're all going for. So yeah, I hope that continues. And I also hope that there are lots of new voices. It's great to kind of, look around and see new voices coming up. And I guess my other hope is that the female narrators, many do this already, will just kind of like drop their rates. I don't mean lower their rates. I mean like drop them in an email like a badass boss. Because it's freaking hot. I hired this female narrator who said, yes, my rate is this much. And I was like, yeah, all right, here, take my money. I just love women in the industry who are just like know their worth and are unafraid to state their worth because they are just as valuable as their male counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been, I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I want you all to be able to get back to your lives. We so appreciate it. I don't know if you've had an eye on the chat at all, but it has been going crazy. So you may want to take a look at that afterwards.
Awesome.
And for those who didn't see yet, Samantha put some links for our panelists so you can keep track of where they are and what they're up to in the chat if you can find it, since there's just constant conversation happening there. But I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to take us out. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us for this first Rosemoor Roundtable. Our next discussion will cover casting and discovering voiceover talent. You can follow all of today's guests on Twitter or Instagram, or find them on their websites, which we've linked in the podcast details. To keep up on what's next for the Rosemoor Roundtable, you can subscribe to this podcast on the app you're listening to now, or follow myself, Samantha Brentmoor, at Ms_Brentmoor, or Rose Dioro at Rose Dioro VO on your social media platform of choice, where we will both enthusiastically be promoting the next discussion. Thank you to Brickshop Audio, our producer and distributor for the podcast, and thank you for joining. See you next time. Let's listen to some more of that sweet royalty-free music.